What if a single photograph could unravel a lifetime of secrets? In a dying Rust Belt town, where rain-soaked streets and a crumbling factory choke the last threads of hope, a young waitress discovers a truth that could either save her community or tear it apart forever. A stranger's arrival, a hidden past, and a buried betrayal spark a journey of resilience, forcing her to decide, rebuild from the ashes or let the weight of the truth destroy everything she loves. The rain came down in torrents, hammering the tin roof of Mabel's Diner in Willow Creek, Ohio, a town so worn it seemed to be dissolving into the earth. The streets were rivers of mud, reflecting the neon flicker of the diner sign, the last pulse of community gutted by the impending closure of the Hale Tech factory. Inside, Ellie Brooks, 24, moved with a weary grace, wiping the counter with a rag as threadbare as her hope. Her dark eyes, shadowed by grief and exhaustion, scanned the nearly empty diner. 2 years ago, her mother, Grace Brooks, had died of cancer, leaving Ellie with crushing medical debt and a leather-bound journal filled with handwritten wisdom about resilience and dignity. That journal, tucked into Ellie's frayed apron, was her lifeline, its pages worn from countless nights spent seeking her mother's strength. Willow Creek was a husk, boarded-up storefronts, abandoned homes, and a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. The Hale Tech factory, once employing half the town, was set to close in 3 weeks, its machinery already being dismantled. Ellie felt the town's decay in every part of her life. The dwindling tips from her shifts, the holes in her sneakers from walking through rain-soaked streets, and the ever-present burden of her mother's unpaid bills. Regulars like Old Man Jenkins, slumped in a corner booth with his cold coffee, muttered about the factory's end like it was their own. Grace's journal, with lines like, "Dignity is standing tall when the world tries to crush you," kept Ellie going, but barely. The bell above the door jangled, sharp against the storm's roar. A man stepped in, shaking rain from a tailorable coat that screamed wealth in a town that had none. His silver-streaked hair and sharp jawline marked him instantly. Victor Hale, billionaire CEO of Hale Tech, the man whose name was a curse in Willow Creek. Ellie knew him from TV, from grainy newspaper photos, always distant, untouchable. His presence in the diner felt like an invasion, a polished intruder in her crumbling world. "Coffee, Black," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the rain's drumbeat. He sat at the counter, his eyes fixed on the chipped formica, avoiding her gaze. Ellie poured the coffee, her hands steady despite the questions clawing at her. As she slid the mug across, Victor reached for his wallet. It slipped, hitting the floor with a soft thud. She bent to retrieve it, her fingers brushing the worn leather. The wallet fell open, revealing a faded photograph tucked inside. A young woman with warm eyes and a smile that stopped Ellie's heart. It was Grace, her mother, no older than 20, radiant in a way Ellie had only seen in old Polaroids hidden in a shoebox. Her breath caught, her pulse hammering. She held the wallet out, her voice trembling but sharp. "Sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" Victor froze, his eyes locking onto the photo. For a moment, he was no longer the untouchable CEO, but a man caught, his face pale, his hands unsteady. "Your mother?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "Grace Brooks," Ellie said, her tone a blade cutting through the storm's noise. "That's her. Why do you have this?" Victor's jaw tightened, his eyes darting around the empty diner, as if the walls might betray him. "Not here," he said, his voice barely audible. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Every instinct screamed at Ellie to throw him out, to demand answers now. But the photo, her mother's face, preserved in the stranger's wallet, held her still. She nodded, leading him to a back booth, its cracked vinyl offering privacy. Old Man Jenkins glanced up, his eyes narrowing with suspicion, but he stayed silent, his coffee forgotten. The rain battered the windows, a relentless rhythm matching Ellie's racing pulse. Victor sat, his hands wrapped around the coffee mug, like it was anchoring him to the earth. "Grace and we were in love," he began, his voice heavy with a grief that seemed to surprise even him. 26 years ago, in Cleveland, at Hale Tech's old headquarters. She worked in accounting, sharp as a tack, fearless. I was young, ambitious, trying to prove myself to my father, Cornelius Hale, who ran the company like a dictator. He didn't approve of us. Ellie's chest tightened. Grace had never spoken to Cleveland, never hinted at a life beyond Willow Creek's narrow borders. Her mother's stories were survival, working double shifts at the diner, shielding Ellie from the town's whispers, teaching her to hold her head high. Why not? Ellie asked, her voice steady but laced with anger. Victor's gaze dropped to the mug, his knuckles white. My father was ruthless. Grace was from a working-class family, not the polished match he wanted for the Hale legacy. When she got pregnant, his voice broke, and he looked away out at the rain-slicked windows. He framed her for embezzlement, told me she'd stolen thousands and fled. I was young, stupid, in awe of him. I believed the lies. I let her go. The word hit Ellie like a punch. Pregnant, she whispered, the truth snapping into place with devastating clarity. With me? Victor met her gaze, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't know, Ellie. I swear, if I had, I would have fought for her, for you. Stop. Her voice was a whip, cutting him off. Her mind reeled, a storm of betrayal and grief. Victor Hale, the man whose factory closure was strangling her town, was her father. The weight of it crushed her, anger at him, sorrow for Grace, who'd carried the secret alone through years of hardship. You let her raise me in this broken place, drowning in debt, while you built your empire. Victor flinched, as if her words were physical blows. I didn't know, he repeated, softer, almost pleading. Years later, after my father died, I found that photo in his files, buried in a locked drawer. I started digging, piecing together what happened. By then, Grace was gone. I've carried that picture ever since, a reminder of what I lost, what I failed. Ellie stood, her hands trembling, her voice rising. You're closing the factory. You're killing Willow Creek. And now you expect me to believe you cared about her. Victor leaned forward, urgency in his voice. I want to make this right, Ellie. For you, for this town, for Grace. Let me fund a project, a community hub, something to bring Willow Creek back to life. No strings attached. Ellie laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the empty diner. No strings? You're a Hale. There's always strings. But the idea took root, dangerous and tempting. Grace's journal, pressed against her hip, whispered of resilience, of building from ruins. Strength isn't in fighting the world, Grace had written, but in rebuilding it. Could Ellie trust Victor? Could she use his guilt to save her town? And the deeper question gnawed at her soul. Could she ever forgive a man who'd abandoned her mother and her without knowing the full truth? The next week was a war of doubt and determination. Ellie pored over Grace's journal nightly, its pages soft from her touch, seeking answers in her mother's words. Dignity is building something better. Even when the world gives you nothing, Grace had written. The diner buzzed with rumors. Townsfolk whispering that Ellie was selling out to Hale Tech, betraying Willow Creek for a payout. Old man Jenkins cornered her one morning, his coffee cold, his voice sharp as broken glass. You trust that snake? He's why we're dying. I don't trust him, Ellie shot back, her eyes blazing. But I trust my mother's strength. If there's a chance to save this town, I'm taking it. She met Victor at the factory, its rusted gates a monument to decay. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, the silence broken only by the drip of rainwater through a cracked roof. Ellie stood tall, her voice iron. If we do this, it's on my terms. No Hale Tech branding, no corporate control. This hub belongs to the people of Willow Creek, not you. Victor nodded, his face unreadable, though his eyes flickered with something like respect. It's your vision. I'm just a bank. Ellie didn't believe him, not entirely. She signed the contract, her hand steady but her heart racing. She rallied the town, skeptical farmers, jobless factory workers, even Jenkins, who grumbled but showed up with a toolbox, his calloused hands ready to work. Over 18 months, they transformed the factory into a community hub. Ellie poured herself into it, her days a blur of blueprints, budgets, and backbreaking labor. She negotiated with contractors, fought for every penny of Victor's funding, and inspired a town that had forgotten how to hope. The hub took shape. A tech training center to teach coding to kids and adults, a free clinic for those crushed by medical debt, a library stocked with donated books, and a garden Grace's grove, blooming with her mother's favorite lilies. Their white petals a quiet tribute against the factory's gray shell. But secrets have a way of surfacing. 6 months into the project, Ellie was clearing out the factory's old office when she found a locked metal box hidden under a loose floorboard. Her hand shook as she pried it open with a crowbar, revealing dozens of letters in Grace's elegant handwriting, addressed to Victor. They were love letters, pleas for him to know the truth about their child, dated 26 years ago. Each one was a knife to Ellie's heart. Grace had written her love, her fear, her hope for their daughter, describing sleepless nights in Willow Creek, scraping by to keep Ellie fed. The letters were never sent. Someone had stopped them, buried them in this forgotten place. Ellie confronted Victor at the hub, the letters clutched in her hand, her voice shaking with rage. "Did you know about these?" Victor's face crumpled as he read the first letter, his hands trembling so badly he nearly dropped it. "No," he whispered, his voice raw. "I never saw these. My father, he must have." "Your father?" Ellie spat, her eyes burning. "Or someone else. Who was close to him? Who made sure these never reached you?" Victor's eyes darkened, a shadow crossing his face. Margaret Ellison, his assistant. She handled his correspondence, his secrets. She was loyal to him, always. Ellie's blood ran cold. Margaret, a quiet, reclusive woman in her 70s, had moved to Willow Creek years ago, living on the town's edge in a small house with drawn curtains. Ellie had seen her at the diner occasionally, always alone, her eyes distant. Now the pieces fit. Ellie tracked her down, knocking on her door in the dead of night. The rain starting again, softer now, but no less ominous. Margaret opened the door, her face pale, her eyes haunted. "I know why you're here," she said, her voice trembling. "Cornelius paid me to destroy the letters. He said Grace was a threat, that she'd ruin the Hale name. I was loyal to him. I thought I was protecting Victor." Ellie's voice was low, dangerous. Each were a shard glass. "You destroyed my mother's life. You kept me from my father." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, her hands twisting together. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I've carried it all these years. I came to Willow Creek to escape it, but it followed me." The confession shattered something in Ellie. She could forgive Victor's ignorance, maybe, but this deliberate betrayal cut deeper, a wound that bled anger and grief. She didn't tell Victor, not yet. She needed time to process, to decide what this meant for her, for the hub, for Willow Creek. The project wasn't without resistance. Half the town didn't trust Ellie's deal with Victor. A group of factory workers, led by Tom Carver, a burly man with a chipped tooth and a chip on his shoulder, confronted her at a town meeting in the old community center, its walls peeling like the town spirit. "You're in bed with Hale," Tom sneered, his voice carrying over the restless crowd. "This hub's just a fancy way to slap his name on our misery." Ellie stood on the creaking stage, her hands on her hips, her voice steady. "This isn't about Victor Hale. It's about us, our kids, our future. You want to let this town die, Tom? Or you want to fight for it?" Her words swayed some, but not all. Tension simmered, erupting in small acts of sabotage. Tools went missing, paint cans spilled, blueprints torn. Ellie suspected Tom's group, but had no proof. One night, she caught a teenager, Sarah Carver, Tom's daughter, spray painting sellout on the hub's half-finished wall. Sarah, 16, with her father's scowl but a tremor in her hands, broke down in tears when Ellie grabbed her arm. "I just want things to go back," she sobbed. "Before the factory closed, before Dad started drinking." Ellie knelt beside her, her voice soft but firm. "Things don't go back, Sarah. But we can build something new. Help me?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded, wiping her tears. She started showing up at the hub, helping with small tasks, her presence a quiet rebellion against her father's anger. Slowly, others followed. Tom's group softened, some even joining the work, their hammers and paintbrushes a grudging apology. Ellie's determination, rooted in Grace's wisdom, began to bind the town together, but the scars of distrust lingered. 9 months into the project, another twist emerged. Ellie received an anonymous letter, slipped under the diner's door, typed in stark black ink. "The truth is bigger than Margaret." It read, "Look at Hale Tekka's books." 1998. Ellie's stomach churned. She spent nights in the library, digging through old records Victor had provided for the hub's funding transparency. In a dusty ledger from 1998, she found a payment of $50,000 to an unnamed account, labeled only consulting. The timing matched Grace's departure from Cleveland. It wasn't just Margaret. Someone else had been paid to silence Grace, to erase her from Victor's life. Ellie confronted Victor again, this time in the hub's unfinished library, the air thick with the smell of fresh paint. She slapped the ledger down, her voice low but fierce. "Who else was involved? Who did your father pay to bury my mother?" Victor's face paled as he scanned the document. I don't know," he said, but his voice wavered, a crack in his armor. "My father had allies, people who did his dirty work. I was kept in the dark." Ellie didn't believe him, not fully. She hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Ray who'd grown up in Willow Creek and owed her a favor from her diner days. Ray traced the payment to a shell company linked to Cornelius's lawyer, Harold Vance, who died a decade ago. But Vance's records, stored in the Cleveland archive, revealed a name, Evelyn Carter, a former Hale Tech board member who still lived in a gated mansion outside Columbus. Evelyn, now in her 80s, had been Cornelius's confidant, a woman known for her loyalty to the Hale family. Ellie drove to Columbus, her old pickup rattling through the rain. Evelyn's mansion loomed, its iron gates cold and imposing. When Ellie confronted her, Evelyn's polished facade cracked. "Cornelius paid me to make sure Grace disappeared," she admitted, her voice brittle. "Not just the letters, her entire existence. I spread the embezzlement rumor, made sure no one at Hale Tech questioned it. It was business." "Business?" Ellie's voice shook with fury. "You destroyed a family." Evelyn's eyes were cold. "You wouldn't understand. The Hale name was everything." Ellie left, her hands shaking, the truth a heavier burden than she'd expected. She didn't tell Victor about Evelyn. Not yet. She needed to focus on the hub, on Willow Creek, on keeping her mother's legacy alive. The hub's grand reopening was a rare bright day, the sun glinting off the renovated factory's new glass windows. Hundreds gathered, locals, reporters, strangers drawn by the story of a waitress reviving a dying town. Ellie stood on a makeshift stage, her dark hair pulled back, her diner apron swapped for a simple dress. Her voice was steady as she spoke of Grace's legacy, of a town that refused to surrender. "This isn't just a building," she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "It's proof we can rise from the ashes together." As she finished, Margaret Ellison stepped forward, uninvited, her frail frame trembling. "I have to tell the truth," she said, her voice carrying over the stunned crowd. She confessed everything. Cornelius's lies, the hidden letters, her role in keeping Grace and Victor apart. Then, in a trembling voice, she added, "It wasn't just me. Evelyn Carter was involved." She made sure Grace was erased. The crowd gasped, phones lighting up, recording every word. The story exploded online, #Willow Creek Truth trending as Ellie's face became a symbol of resilience. Victor, standing at the crowd's edge, looked broken, his empire sins laid bare. That night, he resigned as CEO, issuing a statement naming Ellie as Hale Tekka's new face. She refused, her voice firm over the phone. "I'm not your redemption," she said. "I'm my mother's daughter. I don't want your company. I want to build something real." Ellie used the spotlight to advocate for forgotten towns. The hub became a national model, replicated in Rust Belt communities from Ohio to Michigan. She spoke at conferences, her voice carrying Grace's wisdom. Her diner apron long gone, but her heart still in Willow Creek. The town thrived. Shops reopened. Families returned. The diner packed with new faces swapping stories of hope. Grace's Grove bloomed, a sanctuary where Ellie sat with her mother's journal, feeling her presence in the rustle of the lilies. 2 years later, Ellie sat in Mabel's diner, the rain long gone, the town alive with possibility. Victor walked in, no longer the untouchable CEO, but a man seeking connection, his tailored coat replaced by a simple jacket. They shared a coffee, the silence between them heavy, but not hostile. Ellie traced the rim of her mug, thinking of Grace's journal, of the woman who taught her to find light in the dark. "You have her strength," Ellie said finally, her voice soft but clear. "She loved fiercely, even when it broke her. I see that in you sometimes." Victor's eyes glistened, his hand steady on the photograph he still carried. "I don't expect forgiveness, Ellie, but I want to try. For her or for you. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was a beginning." Ellie stood, slipping Grace's journal into her pocket. Outside, Willow Creek buzzed with life. Children laughed in the streets, the hub's lights glowed, and Grace's grove stood as a testament to a love that endured. The town was no longer dying. It was a beacon, proof that from ashes, something beautiful could grow. Ellie turned to Victor, her voice steady, her eyes clear. "We build forward, not back." That's what she'd want. "That's what I'll do." The bell jangled as a customer entered, a young woman with a laptop, one of the hub's coding students. Ellie smiled, her mother's words echoing. "Build from the ashes, Ellie. Always build." She walked to the counter, ready to serve, ready to keep building, her heart rooted in Willow Creek, but reaching for every forgotten town that needed hope.